time and being with us today. My name is Steve and I'm from Pastor and I just want us to go to a brief session of normally I ask people to say what fire they like or what is their attitude, but we are just asking to say your name and the organization, please. So we'll start. I hope I'm not the mic. I don't know if you need the mic. We'll start with this table as we go, like this. And then after introduction, Paul Richard to take over. So can you start introduction, please, with Sylvester? Good morning. Good morning. I'm not sure the mic is working, but my Saudi is there.
My name is Mubin Azal. I used to work as developer in the Department of Research.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning.
My name is Dr. from the Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries and Properties.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Joy. I work at ASDA, the administration department.
Thank you, Joy.
I work also at hospital.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Kathleen Diabo. I'm a board member in BSP.
Everyone.
My name is Nati Mahim. I work from the
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I am Elizabeth Akinyi. I work for the Africa Platform for Protection, the administration department. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you, Computer.
Good morning. My name is Grace Samon. I'm a board member of the African Platform.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Grace Samon from Thank you, Samon. Thank you, Mkito. Thank you, Lucy.
Good morning. It's Mary June.
Thank you.
Incoming head of social protection.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
My name is Richard Rory, Social Protection Policy Analyst, NSSN.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone.
Thank you so much.
I'm the director in the Director of Social Assistance, responsible for the
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. Now Richard, who will introduce to us this. So Richard, please. Good morning, everyone. That is very good. Yeah, it's exciting. I think for social protection, it's always exciting. Experts in social protection are always excited, guys. They're happy that they are touching lives, they're changing livelihoods, and that's why it's always very, very warm, always, even when outside. So thank you so much. As it has been indicated.
Yeah. Yeah, Chris, you na battery ni na charge hapo. Yeah, Chris.
So once again, as I said, my name is Richard.
Switch to internal. Yeah, make audio go.
This great discussion, just looking into inclusive and just social protection. I know I couldn't be here at Pascal, but together with the government, especially the State Department for Social Protection, Senior Citizen Affairs and Special Programs, that is under the Ministry of Public Service and the other ministry. So, of both institutions to this particular discussion. I know I'll be introducing the rest and especially at that table, but just allow me just to run through and be informed that in this particular time frame, we are intending to cover all that we have up around 9 or 9:55. So after the introduction, we'll be having the presentation of the reform. Basically, we are looking at inclusive social protection. In Kenya, I know it might have a lot of discussion on what's happening in the region, the African region, but basically we are narrowing down to Kenya, just seeing into how our programs, various initiatives across the sectors, how do you play into the whole idea of inclusivity, because that again is a key component of social protection. So I know we don't have quite a wide band for those who are not very, very advanced on social protection to look at the whole framework, but we now ourselves basically to the report that are represented here by Pascal. So we have that presentation just almost immediately after we had the remarks from our leaders here, and then we see the panel discussion where we can see how this outcome should be enhanced, so that we see into how the site findings find their place in active implementation. So we have the map, and then after that, the panel discussion, the presentation of the report, and the panel discussion, where we have the panelists looking further into some of the specific areas. Thereafter, a slight understanding on COVID, the issues of COVID-19 and how this is affecting the lives and the livelihoods, and the post-COVID recovery process, so that we see how it's going to be. What are some of the strategies, what are some of the measures that we are taking as a country to be able to ensure that we not only recover from the negative impact of COVID-19, but also any other emergency shocks of such nature that might hit us in future. So without so much ado, I'll be giving opportunity for our the Chief Executive Officer from Pascal, the one in charge of Pascal organization, Dr. Anthony, please, or one to invite me to go into serve and also make it ready.
I hope you make up
Thank you very much. On behalf of Pastor, let me first
Password immediately nakuma.
Ministry of Social Protection Council always been one of our biggest supporters. Once again, to discuss some of the issues. Thank you very much. Director General, I'm not sure whether it's the head. Yesterday I was asking the General, this is the head. This is the head. The head was here with us. And the team was this is a continuation of what we started with social protection. Last year, we had a huge successful conference on social protection.
Inasemaje? Unaweza kuwa kuna kadi nisaidie.
A lot of people in different countries nowadays discuss only Kenyan issues, African issues on social protection. Knowledge our partners in Africa,
Nisaidie, mimi ndio nitakurudishia.
African platform for social protection.
Ndio nimerudisha.
Thank you so much for just being a supporter. Including social protection.
Najua kila mtu amelogi. So look at it.
Now,
I'm telling you.
my job is not to do a lot of long speeches. I just want to give a quick recap of why we're here. Why is it important for us in this couple of hours to put our thoughts together, think about Kenya, discuss about Kenya, more broadly about Africa. Us as a Pan-African institution, Kenya is one of the direct countries, but the main countries that and just to give a quick, for those who maybe have not attended the conference last year, I thought of jotting down some of the key issues that we discussed last year, which could form the part of this conversation. One of the issues that was discussed last year was the dichotomy between formal and informal social practice, and how we overcome this dichotomy, formal versus informal, in addressing social exclusion. I think this is a very important issue. Formal and informal, what can we recognize formal, these are informal, and how much of informals we have a lot going on in the content can help address some of the exclusion challenges that we face. There's also an issue on scalability and ownership, experimental innovations from local adjustment. We've seen quite a lot of experimental innovations. Cash transfer is one of those innovations. Additional conditional cash transfer. What is the only one? Can they be contextualized? They work, can we are we in a position to scale them up so that they can reach many people? Across the continent. Are there any other experimental innovations that we done across the continent? That is a very topical conversation to the conferences. What are the opportunities and challenges of digital technology? Technology in terms of how we design it, the delivery, sustainability, and accountability of social protection. This is key. MSI, we have elderly people. CS during the conference, I was telling you the massive programs that the Kenyan government is doing with respect to digital transformation in order to reach the most vulnerable who don't have access to platforms. And what are the challenges that come with cases where parents were elderly access. When the money is transferred by the government, the kids they go back to the village. You know, these are some of the challenges. How do we mitigate some of these? Nowadays, biometrics are using so that it's only the parents can access the resources. But what about the challenge that comes with accessing the 2019 shows that 1 out of 5 access into platforms is internet, for example. Because they have, how can the government navigate the challenges with respect to platforms that they need to reach the most vulnerable in society? The other issue is how do we capture the voices and representation of citizens in decision-making? How, in other words, the economics we call, how do we distribute the national cake so that everyone gets a fair share? Social protection in Kenya is a Kenyan thing. How do Kenyans, how are they involved? Where are their voices in the representation? How do they hold the government accountable? In other words, how does the government also capture voices of those who are most vulnerable and hear them and implement them, include them in the policy processes? This is very critical. Our discussion this morning will sort of echo a little bit of that. And then, how can African governments finance social protection sustainably? In this case, how can Kenyan government? What are the plans? One of the challenges the continent we've seen for many years is designing very lucrative, very impactful programs, and we rely on donors to support our programs. Now, can we do better? Are there thinking around what do governments plan, what do governments think about mobilizing domestic resources to support our most vulnerable? Are there plans? If they are, how far have we gone? What are the challenges? So I think this is also a very pertinent question. And I know now the way the world is evolving, things are changing. Last year, we were worried about COVID. And at that point was Delta, I think. Now we have Omicron. Before Omicron, there's another form of virus that came called Russia-Ukraine war. That's another form of virus, which is also suffocating us in some ways. And what we are learning is because of these global geopolitical shocks that are happening outside our borders, we are vulnerable in many ways. We have seen inflationary pressure across countries, energy crisis we are hearing now. Yesterday, the day before, I was watching news. The Americans now are increasing interest rates to fight inflation because one, of energy prices that are increasing, but also because of supply chain challenges in China because of COVID. We are not far off from this because they transmit second-order contagions of these shocks. They will reach us, who will be vulnerable. And most often, what we have learned in the last 2 or 3 years of COVID is that the most vulnerable are those who are very low in the food chain. What are the mitigation mechanisms that we have in place to cushion these people, these brothers and sisters of ours in Kenya and across the continent, so that they don't fall into sheer poverty? And then finally, the last important point to think about, resilience of indigenous knowledge in fighting, or rather in addressing social protection in the continent. What are the lessons learned? Yes, there are some very innovative approaches that came from the West, but we do have indigenous approaches to social protection. To what extent these indigenous knowledge and practices are valued and are taken into account when we think of social protection? We've had this since time immemorial. Before even the colonizers were here, our forefathers and great-great-grandparents had a way of coping to shocks like social protection challenges. Now, to what extent? We all have some sort of responsibility. You're taking care of your sister's daughter, your brother's auntie. No, there's some sort of social protection we are doing. We don't realize that that's some form of social protection. We do have some indigenous practices. In Kenya, you have Harambes, Changa, what do you call it? Chama. Well, I'm not Kenyan, so I'm trying to pick from what I've at least I've emulated over the years that I've lived here. Now, with all of that, That's some form of social protection. You rely on your friends. Si mzee unitumie ile kale kanani, sio nauli, tuma ile nani ile. Si ndio? Alafu anakurudishia bila interest. Kikwamba si unitumie nirudishie 1,000, si ndio? That is some form of social protection, but at that point you need that. Si ndio? And how do we really harness some of these indigenous approaches, to addressing social protection challenges in our countries? This is very pertinent. So I just wanted to echo these 6 areas that we discussed last year. And my hope is that this morning, very briefly, we can have a sort of a well-rounded conversation around these issues. Also in view of what has happened in the last 8 or 9 months also. Things have changed, priorities have changed. And what is our thinking around just and inclusive social protection in Kenya and by extension in many other African countries. So with those few remarks, allow me to stop here. Visitors tend to talk a lot. If you give us the platform, we'll keep talking. But over the years, I've learned to stop myself. So thank you so much, and welcome to Pascal. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Let's appreciate him better. Thank you so much. I think that is very informative. You've really set the pitch right. And I hope now we have the right context and understanding of what it's all about. Allow me to invite Madam Jacinta to kindly give our remarks, and then Madam Jacinta will welcome our head, Madam Jean. So thank you. Let's appreciate her so that she feels.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay, let me start by introducing myself. I'm Jacinta Omondi. Jacinta Omondi, I work at the National Social Protection Secretariat. I'm the deputy head at the Secretariat. And being the deputy head, apart from being the deputy, I also head the partnership policy and partnership unit. So the unit that is responsible for all the policy matters relating with the partners and all, and even training. So that is what we do at the Secretariat. So let me take this opportunity on behalf of the State Department for Social Protection, Senior Citizens Affairs, and Special Programs to really thank you, Pascal, for, we are partners here, but let me thank you for organizing this meeting so that we put our heads together and see a way forward in the social protection sector. As a ministry, let me say that the social protection sector is a very, very fast and changing sector. I want to say that every day we wake up or any time there are normally changes in this area. So our work would just be to look at how do we deal with the changes, how do we deal with the vulnerability of people and all that is happening. So a good example here, I like mentioning this because we are currently reviewing our social protection policy. And last year, when we thought that we were just about to finish, came COVID. The policy as it is right now has 4 pillars: income, health, shock responsive, and complementary. So with COVID, we had to go back and open it again. Look at the shock responsive pillar. What do you want to capture in this pillar? And we looked at it. Initially, shock, we were just thinking about drought. We were just talking about floods. How about diseases? So we had to go back, critically look at this pillar and ask ourselves, as Kenyans, this is the policy that we want to work with. is it really capturing even what we have seen right now? So that's why we are saying that this sector is fast changing, and I'm very happy for Pastor for the research you are doing, because this research informs what we do. At the moment, we can be taking initiatives on what we are doing, but without research, we'll not be able to authoritatively say that what we are doing should be the right thing. So it is good we are going to hear what is happening here, because it will help us to make our decisions, change, introduce new things, and do what is right for us. I like what you said even about the cash transfer. There are a lot of thoughts around it. Is it beneficial to the people? Is it serving the right purpose? So once you do the research, we see what is going on, it really informs the way we work. As a country, we are also now moving towards universality in social protection. You can see we have the 70 plus, which is universal. And we are also working on UCB, Universal Child Benefit. For us, it would be a very good opportunity. Also, as we are working on this, what are the factors that informs all this? And I must say that our colleagues from health are here, from the Ministry of Health. Even in the UCB, they really informed us about the 1,000 days of a child's life. What are the benefits? The researches that have been done, whether it's on nutrition, whether it's on the, what do you call it, the mind of a person, how development takes place. So with all this, we are very happy that our social protection initiatives are informed, and as we are doing it, we do very good things. And even when we are talking about the informal and informal social protection, I'm very happy that these researchers are going to help us, because up to last year, nobody even thought that people in the employment sector can be vulnerable. Were we not waking up and finding that you don't have a job? That is what happened. And with that, you are at home. So it would also be good for us as a country, as we are seriously looking at ways of improving on our social protection. We look at such vulnerabilities, and we know that each and every person is vulnerable. So let me not say much. I'm very, very happy for Pascal for the research that you're going to inform us with. I've been told that you've been with the social protection for a very long time. I was not, I've been informed, I had not met you for some times maybe up to last year, but be assured that we are going to work together, and whatever decisions we are going to make, we are going to do a lot of changes in this sector. So let me not say much. I'm waiting to hear about the report, and also just to see how we move forward. So thank you so much. Let me take this opportunity to welcome our head for Social Protection Secretariat, Madam Jane, just to greet you and say what she would like to say. And Jane, as you are coming, I don't know when we are going to introduce our two other people. Yeah, Jane, take this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jacinta. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Like you've been told, my name is Jane Moyanga. I'm the incoming head of the Social Protection Secretariat. I'm just 2 days old in that office, and I'm happy at least to have a team that we are going to work together. And just before I say anything, I want to recognize the presence of our colleagues, Rosabel Gidinji from National Council for Persons with Disability, and Juliet Mara from NHIF. And I also want to recognize David Kamau from WFP. We've done a lot of work with them. Having said that, mine is just to appreciate the partnerships that we are having in this sector. It is becoming too dynamic and moving faster than us. And we have to make a deliberate effort to also run. Because like you'll notice, COVID taught us a lot of things. And as we look at the social protection sector, we need to be asking ourselves, are the programs that we are undertaking considering the various needs of our people? I think the biggest program we have as a country is the cash transfer. But is that adequate enough for everyone? When you look at our lessons learned from COVID, we are having a new dimension of what we are calling the missing middle. People who wake up who are very stable, but all of a sudden they find themselves with some certain vulnerabilities. How do we deal with that missing middle? The other issue we need to be asking ourselves is, how do we bring in the complementary programs? Like, for example, I know under the State Department, we are having the nutrition improvement through cash and health education. We are having the economic inclusion. How can we integrate these programs into what we are doing? So we are looking forward to greater participation, greater interaction. Feel free to knock at our doors. We are open to learning. None of us is a monopoly of ideas. And we look forward to whatever researches that are being done, kindly share. Because the biggest challenge we've had is we have too much information that has not been shared and that has not been made use of. And we are looking forward to a partnership where we can be able to use data to push for our case in social protection. And with that being new, I'm looking forward to learning from you and hoping that as we proceed, we will be able to make the social protection sector more vibrant and something that at the end of the day, Kenyans will be able to appreciate the efforts that we are making. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Madam Jane. I don't think that level of appreciation was adequate to the heavy points I've had. Thank you so much. I think that is very clear and really sets us all in on the same page regarding our discussions today. Very key issues coming out from those very heavy remarks. You know, the inclusivity, which is the focus of our discussion today, but more so looking into what can we as a country, what can we not only learn, but also be able to, you know, implement from very high level up to the program level in terms of moving social protection forward, taking note of the various, you know, dynamics that are in the sector, the transformations, the changes, the challenges that we are experiencing, and more so, as Madam Jane has said, how do we address? I heard the director speak to issues of, you know, being sensitive to the issues of the informal, drawing from the previous conference, the dichotomy in the informal and rural economy. And that brings us to the key issue of the missing middle. And that forms quite a basis for our discussion, just seeing into how then do we ensure appropriate programming that will take us forward in ensuring, you know, inclusive social protection or social protection for all. So with that, I think the pitch is clearly set, and we would want to go into the findings that would give more light into the focus of today. I'll have Madame Dr. Nzau will be presenting, and from the presentation now we can be able to clearly
advance the debate. Welcome, Madam.
Thank you very much. Good morning once again, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. My name is Mudio Nzao. I am a postdoc at PASGA, and I'll be doing this presentation on behalf of my colleagues. So the title of our presentation today is Towards an Inclusive and Justice Social Protection in Kenya. And the presentation today will be strongly building up into our objective 3, which we aim as we go through the presentation for us to begin to introspect and sort of to come up with ideas on how we can achieve or we can map out the priorities of change and action in transitioning to an inclusive, just, and equitable social protection agenda in Kenya. So a quick outline of what I will be talking about. First, I'll give the social protection context in Kenya. I will give our contributions as PASGA so far into this agenda, and I will point out what we have learned as the social protection gaps in Kenya, some of the best practices across Africa that we could think of borrowing to sort of revamp our social protection here in the country. Then we'll look at what has been the takeaway message of all the previous engagements we have done until this point. Then we'll particularly introspect on our conference that we held with most of you as partners here on inclusive and just social protection in August 2020. Then finally, we will try to brainstorm, or I'll give you food for thought on how can we move forward into a new, bolder social protection agenda as a country. So as a form of introduction, social protection in Kenya is a constitutional right. We appreciate this very much. And since 2011, there has been the Kenya Social Protection Policy. And these are based on 3 social protection pillars. This includes social assistance, social security, and health insurance. In 2019, the SP as social protection received only, but we appreciate 2% of the national budget. That covers only 22% of the eligible households in this country. And some of the sobering statistics on coverage include, we can see that the most covered at 77% are the older persons, while people living with severe disabilities, for example, trail at only 1% of coverage. Then again, on the sobering statistics that we have in our country, that majority of us are in the informal sector, and at least our bulging youth population is at least 15% youth unemployment rate in Kenya. Yet, as we can see above in the table, these are hardly captured in our current coverage. But we must appreciate that social protection spending has consistently increased in the last 2 decades in Kenya, albeit very marginally. So what has been PASGA's contribution so far into the social protection space? In PASGA, we have established an Utafiti Sera House where we have commissioned 3 pilot studies and continental webinars on social protection in Africa. And subsequently, we held a Pan-African hybrid conference in August 2021 at the peak of the pandemic on inclusive and just social protection. We have subsequently created a partnership platform, and this breakfast meeting is evidence to that, of like-minded organizations to advocate for inclusive and just social protection in our country. And gradually, we are expanding the scope for actors to participate in the social protection agenda through the inclusion of citizen voices in the social protection agenda. Ultimately, what we hope to achieve is sort of a holistic approach that reflects on the entire social protection landscape in our country and sort of see how we can translate this into meaningful outcomes for recipients and the nation at large. And we aim to achieve by advocating for responsive, evidence-informed policies, and that is the gist of this breakfast meeting. We must appreciate that this work we have not done alone. We have done, especially with the Ministry of Public Service, Gender and Senior Citizens Affairs and Special Programs. We appreciate the State Department of Protection, Senior Citizen Affairs and Special Programs, as well as the Open Society Initiative for Eastern Africa, among other key stakeholders. So from our previous work that I have hinted to, what are the gaps that we have found in social protection in Kenya? And this builds very strongly on what our speakers have spoken so far. So the first thing that we discover is that there is a strong missing or muted voices still in the social protection decision-making. And there are critical non-state actors, beneficiaries, and other representatives that are missing. As we adopt the life cycle risk program in sort of programming our social protection in Kenya, we must, I think, pay critical attention to child poverty, child malnutrition, and child disability, which are sobering statistics in Kenya, because as it were, social protection at the moment is rather diagnostic. As we can see, there's older people that are getting the chunk of what we have for social protection. Against preventive, should we merge this, or should we also pay attention, critical attention to children in order to sort of prepare in the next 100 years that we do not have to cure the vulnerabilities that come with old age? And then the second gap is coverage. And we must appreciate that there are emerging innovations that address coverage issues in our countries across gender, disability, and the informal sector. But still, there is a lot of scope limitations in terms of the geography of where our current social protection programs are covering, the culture, socioeconomic gaps, and more critically, the employment sector, where still we are grappling with a majority of the informal sector who form the majority of people in this country missing. Again, on point 3, we appreciate that Kenya specifically has made important strides in adapting digital technology in SP. Still, however, there is ignorance of the capability and access issues of the very extreme poor in this country. Can they afford a phone? Can they afford to keep it on? Do they have electricity? Can they read? Are they literate enough to understand what is being communicated to them in these digital platforms, for example? And even more critical, especially now during the global economic instability that we are experiencing now, we must appreciate that we have a heavy reliance on donor support, which raises serious concerns about the sustainability of our SP innovations. At the moment, we are seeing a lot of diversion of this donor support to address other crises elsewhere. So where does that leave us as a country? Do we need to strongly think about how we can really finance our social protection programs? And I see this as an opportunity for us rather than as a challenge. So this will be very important for us to deliberate in this breakfast meeting. And finally, on the emerging issues, there are still very uncoordinated yet potentially viable social protection in the informal sector, as I have repeatedly said. There have been disruptions caused by the COVID-19 pandemic and new lessons that are being learned in the SP landscape, and again on the instabilities in the global political economy landscape. So through our studies, we have collected evidence, or gathered evidence on some of the best practices across Africa that in this conference, in this breakfast meeting, we can already begin to think about if we can borrow experiences of what has worked elsewhere in Africa. And for example, here at home, we are implementing the minimum wage as well as in Morocco and in Benin. There are issues of coverage and coordination, but at least it's a good step ahead. Going to our neighboring Ethiopia, they have what they call the labor markets interventions, such as public employment program and reduced taxation on SMEs. There is universal health coverage that is working well in Rwanda. Again, in Rwanda, they are embracing the informal social protection systems, such as community-based health insurance schemes. Forgive me for not pronouncing this, in Rwanda. Then going further a bit to the west, we have citizen participations. This include voice and representation in social protection in livelihood empowerment against poverty, a cash transfer that is seen as a success in Ghana. Then further down in South Africa, again for the informal sector, they have something called the Basic Conditions of Employment Amendment Act. So this is an act of government that is very commendable. And then in Lesotho, Namibia, and South Africa, again, there's the enhancement of tax financed benefits. And finally, talking about what, as Dr. Anthony probed us to think about our indigenous systems of Harambe, the Harambe spirit. So in Botswana, they're already tapping into this by institutionalizing merry-go-round savings, for example. Is this something viable for us here in the country? And what have been our takeaways so far from the work that we have been doing? We realize that despite Africa's economic growth in the last decades, the rate of poverty has equally gone up. Social protection, therefore, needs not to be about cash transfer only. It can also include asset transfers and empowerment to address rising poverty and the arising inequalities. Then our second takeaway is that the transformation of social protection in Africa and its future will require a mix of formal and informal social protection mechanisms. Again, the third point is that innovations should be considered within the process. And I will speak to this, to this point in the next slide. They should go beyond expected outcomes and see policy change as a long-term engagement. We can never put the best policy up and hope that it covers the next 10 to 50 generations. We must appreciate that we must deliberately and actively have these engagements for the betterment of Kenya and our continent. And lastly, across the African continent, there has been an excess reliance on informal social protection, again, which we have not tapped into, which is based on reciprocal arrangements rather than on policy, as my ED pointed out earlier in his speech. So, since the conference that we held in August 2021, what have we improved? And this is a big question mark that I beseech us to introspect on. The results that we shared then, have they begun to be adopted into policy processes? And this is against what has evolved since 2021. We have now new COVID variants. We are already talking about post-COVID-19. Are we really post? China is going back to lockdown. So what can we expect in Kenya, and how can we really begin to prepare? And again, the global political economic instabilities that are currently being experienced in the Western world, these are having a huge impact on us in global supply chain disruptions. I'm sure all of us are aware of the emerging war on energy, and how that has led to massive inflation of our basic food commodities, wheat, milk, and cooking oil, for example. And this has subsequently increased the vulnerabilities of our Kenyan people. So just looking, this is a challenge to all of us, looking at what has improved, how slow are our processes? Can we make them evolve as fast as the national, the global landscape is evolving on vulnerabilities? I think this is an important challenge for us today. So other than offering solutions, I will offer you some food for thought that will lead us into the panel discussions, and that we hope that will mold sort of our questions to the panelists and to ourselves in the next sessions. So how can we address the lax compliance with regulation that is rampant across Africa? The best practices that I've already shown you, all those, when you read in literature, they are marred with massive irregulatory challenges of corruption, of lack of adherence. So how can we take it upon ourselves to better the generations that are coming after us? Yeah, how can we think beyond the let me benefit first, for example, and sort of really address compliance issues in our country? How can we sustainably finance our social protection schemes without relying on donor funding? This is a huge issue in Africa and in our country as well in Kenya. How can we redesign SP in Kenya to justly include informal sector? And that is tied closely to how can we have an honest inclusion of citizen voices within design, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation? Again, when you go through literature, we are finding that the massive criticism on what really inclusion means. And it's now been taken, inclusion as of community or people who are considered to be in the informal sector has been taken as a rubber stamp. We have ideas, we take to those to the informal sector or to people we consider to be the community, and we ask them in a very strategic way to rubber stamp what we have already come out with. So we need to ask ourselves very, very, very honestly how we can have an honest inclusion of their voices. And how can we achieve robust accountability and grievance mechanisms? How do we take charge of future unprecedented pandemics and global political economic instabilities? And most importantly, in Africa, we are not so, our history is not so short of social protection schemes. It's just that we consider what our forefathers have been doing for decades as informal, and how can we institutionalize this? Is there a space for that? Because we have been doing social protection on our own. It's just that that is informal, and now what we're discussing here is formal. How can we bridge that dichotomy is very important. And lastly, can we reduce the requirements of registration documents? Can we simplify tax regimes? Can we have contributory collection mechanisms? And most importantly, the lesson that we have learned from COVID and we're still learning, can we allow for deferral of contribution during shocks? Thank you. Asanteni sana kwa kunisikiliza. I hope we are going to have a fruitful discussion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much, colleagues. That basically findings and drawing from the conference that we held here last year. I appreciate that Dr. Anthony had briefly taken us through some of the key salient issues that were discussed in the last conference, and that the findings are heavily drawing from, because I believe from those particular conference recommendations, then we have had a dive into some of these. I know I should be giving an opportunity for reactions into what has been presented, but just to highlight briefly on the key areas that I would want to focus on. I know, as you've said, it's moving towards an inclusive and just social protection system in Kenya, and just looking into issues of coverage. To what extent are our programs and interventions inclusive? How do we ensure that we have, comprehensive coverage? How do we tap into the digital economy? How do we ensure that this is, receptive to social protection moving forward? How do we enhance financing as a key discussion, a key area of concern for most of the social protection intervention? And of course, the ever, always appearing issue on the informal sector, and how best we can ensure inclusion of the informal economy. And then, of course, with a glimpse of that drawing us into what are some of the best practices that have been seen across the continent, some of the programs, social protection programs across the countries that have been trying to ensure issues of inclusivity, just seeing broadly into how then are these programs having an impact on poverty reduction, ensuring that the different categories of the population are well included. Of course, I know he's given us quite a raft of food for thought with very fundamental questions. I hope somebody addresses that. Yeah, I'm just saying that he's given us quite a raft of issues and questions around things that you'd want to ensure that we take note of, looking into what is it that has improved over time, looking at the global political economy, looking on issues of impact of COVID-19 and some of the responses, building larger into issues of resilience, and then how can we move using all that to move into a whole shift, a whole paradigm shift in terms of, advancing an inclusive social protection system in Kenya. I can remember from the remarks of Madam Jane, strongly pointing to the need for an integrated approach to social protection, taking note of the voices of the citizen and engaging them and including them right from the the design of these programs up to the end, the last point of implementation. So I know by and large, you've had, you have had your key points that you've noted around the presentation and what we need to take note of. I know, as at now, allow me not to really open for a plenary, but I would just want to request that you take note of the key things that you'd want to bring out, because we will have the panelists, take a deeper dive into some of the issues that have been, presented in the report. So if you allow me, then I would request our panelists for today to take their positions. I know we have with us Dr. Anthony, who will also will be taking part in this. We'll have Mr. John Gashigi, the director, Directorate of Social Assistance, joined by Madam Jane Boyanga, who is the head Social Protection Secretariat. And also we'll have Madame Busolo from the African Platform for Social Protection. So kindly, panelists, I request that we take our position. Let's have a round of applause even as they take their position. We really appreciate the level of expertise. These have been experts in the social protection space at different levels, serving in different organizations, and we really want to tap into what then would they offer in this great discussion. So allow me to kindly request Richard Rory to join the panelists. So colleagues, we're here and we've had the report basically pointing into the key areas that we want to tap into, picking on the major question, how then do we want to see, where do you want to see social protection in the next few years? How do you want to design the social protection agenda for Kenya moving forward, drawing from some of the experiences that you have had and based on some of the findings from this particular report that we've been able to discuss. So first of all, allow me just to do a quick round regarding the presentation that has been made, just to see to what extent has knowing social protection in Kenya based on these particular findings. This is looking across the various sectors in Kenya. How then do you think this report speaks to some of the realities that we have in Kenya with regard to social protection? So allow me to give Dr. Anthony the first chance to react to this particular presentation.
Unfortunately, I'm always on this top spot. Okay, now I'll be biased because I will be speaking for Pascal. I think, and I'll speak more broadly in terms of the work that we do, the modus operandi, and then I will come down to your question on what we think of this report, the evidence that we are generating in social protection, and what does it mean for the governments. First of all, I think in terms of the way we work, social protection or in other projects that we do, throughout we decide we engage key stakeholders. It's very important to engage the key stakeholders because we don't do the typical academia type of research where you sit in your office, you think of this interesting hypothesis you want to test, and then you run out. We rely on what practitioners are saying and the gaps, and we take it from there. So in terms of what through that process, we believe there's co-creation, there's ownership of the evidence that we generate, number one. But in terms of the report or the findings that my colleague presented about what we're learning on social protection and the best practices across the countries that we work with in this space, I think there are a lot of lessons for Kenya to emulate. Each country has its own experiences, each country has its own nuances, and I think if there's one big key lesson that we all need to take is what do we learn from each other? And we are doing this because most of our projects are cross-country. They involve more than one country. And one of the things that we try as much as possible is to pick what are the nuances in a particular country so that other countries also can learn. This is what Kenya is doing. Can Tanzania learn about what Kenya is doing? Can Rwandans learn about what Kenya is doing? So in terms of the best practices, I think there's so much that Kenya can borrow, and I know Kenya is doing pretty well in terms of advancing its agenda on social protection across the region. And I think I would not wish the policymakers here and those in the audience to be complacent. There's still a lot to be done. vulnerabilities evolve, right in the way you say it. There are things that sometimes are not foreseen. I was sitting part of the high-level delegation in the EAC on when COVID started. We did a very big research in 6 countries in Africa, and I was leading that research. On health, we discovered at the regional level, there's so many challenges that countries are facing, even coordination. How do we navigate future pandemics, for example? How do we prepare ourselves for unforeseen events? We're struggling with COVID. Before we know, Russia-Ukraine war is here, and we're still struggling. We have to start thinking. So for how long can we be reactive rather than being proactive? So I think that the lesson here for policymakers within social protection is to think forward, to plan ahead and anticipate some of these challenges. The beauty of what we do, we try to bring some of these experiences, some of this evidence closer to your doors, so you don't have to go around and start looking. We bring experiences from other countries, we bring best practices from other countries, so it makes it easy for you to process and make sense and contextualize within your environment to what extent this makes sense, to what extent, what can you take, what can you not take, what can you learn, what can you not learn. And I think I would like to plead to the policymakers, be open-minded, be ready to learn. This is very important because things are changing, Africa is evolving. And I would like to speak to one thing that is very particularly important. Youth is a very important area now. Everywhere, we're going to election, many countries are going to election. 70% of African youth, of African population is almost youth under 30. These are very important people. Yes, we have our elderly, we have to take care of our elderly, but I was attending a roundtable meeting in the Canadian Embassy yesterday. Somebody said very interesting, very provocative thing. They said, it's worrying in Africa, particularly in Kenya. As much as we're enjoying demographic dividend now, in terms of age, but the levels of income growth, one of the pillars in social protection, right? The levels of income growth, they need to catch up with the aging. The risk is people will age before income growth catch up with age. Are the governments going to be able to absorb the elderly? This is exactly what is happening in Europe. They're aging fast, their birth rate has actually gone down dramatically, but their levels of income are bigger enough to cushion and take care of the elderly. If you think about our countries, think about Kenya. In the next 50 years, we're all going to be, if God gives us grace to live longer, we're all going to be old in here, right? There are quite a number of people who are going to be old. So the number of people who are old will be higher. Can the income growth, can all these mitigation mechanisms be able to cope with that growth? And for me, that was a very provocative statement for someone to make. It made me reflect. I think this is what we need to think. And I plead to the policymakers, mechanisms, interventions that you design need to be reflected. And PASCA as an organization is in that space to help you think together and bring collective Afrocentric voices, Afrocentric evidence that can speak to some of these challenges, whether we can anticipate or those that we cannot anticipate. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. for that. Very elaborate, very clear, very, very insightful. And based on what I'm getting from your comments and even from the report, I also see issues on coverage. How do we ensure that even as you speak about, the demographic dividend that Kenya is enjoying now, which if they don't positively tap into, it might become a challenge in the next few years. And that would bring me to our next question, maybe to John before. How do you, I've seen issues on coverage, the percent of coverage, the level of coverage across the country. I've seen statistics speaking to only 22% of those who are eligible being covered, with very minimum coverage for the youth and also for persons with disability. Although we are fairly somewhere with the old, but you realize that the interventions, I could hear the Deputy Head Social Protection remark on, issues around children. You can see how low that coverage is, but she was speaking to how then would we ensure, issues of productivity, because social protection should again enhance productivity. So kindly, John, I would want to ask you, knowing the social protection sector in Kenya, and especially the cash transfers, which you're directly in charge of. What is your take on this? What do you comment around, issues of, the life cycle risks and the interventions that we should have, especially for children and the youth, as has been elaborately brought out by your colleague and also from the report?
Thank you, Richard. The presentation was quite exhaustive. It covered most of those areas which are very relevant to us, and some of those things which were presented are actually factual. In terms of the coverage, it's true that we have not covered everyone who is in need, but at least we have tried. In terms of geographical coverage, in terms of the cash transfer, our 3 cash transfers, our 4 cash transfers, the 3 of them have got a wider national coverage. Like the older person's cash transfer covers all the 280 constituencies, all the 47 counties, and it has got a coverage of about 833,000 households, as we are talking today. For the orphans and vulnerable children, it also covers the whole country, all the 280 constituencies, go up to the locational level. It has a coverage of 352,000 households. And then for the persons with severe disability, the same case applies, that it covers all the 47 counties, 280 constituencies. The only challenge in that one is that it covers persons with severe disability, does not cover persons with disability. And that's why we have a bit of discrimination in terms of that one. Then the last one, which is called the Hunger Safety Net Program, that one is a poverty targeted program targeting those areas with the marginalized, the arid and semi-arid counties. It has a coverage of about 110,000 beneficiaries. It covers only the 4 arid counties, that is Mandera, Wajir, Marsabit, and Turkana. So, but in terms of the coverage, so in total, we are covering about 1.33 million households in the whole of Kenya. And if you multiply that one by the household size of about 6 per household, we are covering over about more than 7 million people who are benefiting from the programs. The beauty about our program is that all the cash transfers we are giving to the citizens of Kenya, and we have an annual budget of over 30 billion Kenya shillings, is 100% tax financed. We don't spend even a coin from the donors in paying for our cash transfer programs. And that's a very, very important point to note. In order for us now to improve on the coverage, because we are not covering everybody, the government is coming up with several interventions. One of them, currently we are piloting a universal child benefit program, so that now we can adopt the inclusive recycle approach, and also we go universality in terms of the program. So currently for the UCB, we are piloting in 3 counties, that is Kajiado, Embu, and also in Kisumu. And we are hoping that once we finish the piloting, we are now going to expand maybe to all the other counties. The program is covering those children who are between who are 2 years and below, and we are hoping that if the program can be expanded gradually, it will expand, because every year you are taking those children who are below 2 years, 2 years, 2 years. So maybe in 10 years' time, it will have covered most of the household. And we are saying this is a universal program, meaning that it's covering all those children who are below that one. So that's one area we are looking at. The other one is that we have developed a social protection investment plan. That social protection investment plan is also to address the issue of the coverage. Because we are looking at alternative sources of income. How do we generate money? How do we tap extra resources so that maybe we can be able to bring on board? And when we say that it is a universal program for the 70 years, the last time we enrolled people for the 70 plus was in 2017. So now we are 5 years down the line. But maybe if we have a strategic plan, maybe with the money, it will mean that every time year somebody reaches the birthday of 70, maybe they are enrolled into the program. Finally, what I would like also to say is that for our program also to be very, very, very effective, we need collaboration, we need integration, we need the cross-working relationship with the donors and other people, so that we can be able now to deliver on this And maybe where the government cannot be able maybe to work on, maybe they are supported by those donors. But basically, in terms of the coverage, we are really doing well. But one thing which is assisting us and moving forward to address the issue of the coverage, that we are coming up with a social registry. The social registry is going to address that issue in the sense that we are going to establish a database of all the poor and vulnerable people in Kenya in all the 47 counties. And once that social registry is up and running, it have that data. Moving forward in the future, when we want maybe either to expand, either vertically or maybe horizontally, we will be going back to the field to collect fresh data. We will be updating that data. And that way now, it is easier now even maybe to approach, maybe supporters even approach the government and tell them that, look here, we have this data, we have this category of the people, maybe we can design a program so that we can support them because data is available. And you know, data is a very, very good evidence which you can be able to show. And that data we are going to do the social registry. We are not only doing the population statistics, we are collecting the household characteristic data, including the poverty index of those households. So it's data which is very, very, very comprehensive, which can be used to convince the government, the policymakers, and even the partners. Thank you.
Thank you so much, John. Thank you for very elaborate explanation, looking at coverage, looking at what is the future of some of our programs. And I know I'll be coming back to you with very specific issues on how then the country has been able to respond to some of the challenges you have experienced, especially the COVID-19. And I know the moves that you're making as a country, both in terms of policy and even in terms of programming. And I know you'll be able to elaborate further. But before that, and before I come to Richard, in terms of understanding what are the key strategies that are engaged in bringing in the informal sector so that the risks you've been speaking about since can be addressed. Allow me, first of all, to come to Madam Usolo. I know the civil society is very important. And we know in the history of Kenya how the civil society organizations have been very, very instrumental in enhancing accountability. I've heard in the report time and again the mention of the inclusiveness of the voices of the people and the citizens at all levels, whether in design, implementation, so that the accountability, issues of accountability in programming can be well articulated. Maybe to you, Madam, I just want to understand from you, what do you think is the role of civil society organization in ensuring inclusivity in the just social protection system? Just directly.
Okay, good morning. Thank you for inviting us. I would just like to first of all appreciate the presentation that was made. And I would also want to say that the civil society does not work in isolation. The civil society derives its agenda from what the government framework. So we cannot work on our own without, getting to know what it is that we are fulfilling, because we are at the level of implementation and the level of dissemination, and advocacy. So those are the main areas, and even developing systems for monitoring and evaluation. And so far, if I may just refer even to our organization, which is the Africa Platform of Civil Social Protection, we have been engaged at various levels. We know very well that even the Kenyan agenda on social protection is actually informed by the AU. So we have been operating at that particular level. So the issues of inclusivity are actually involved at that particular level. So like APSP was involved in drafting this protocol on Africa Charter for Human and People's Rights. I think we talked about it last year or the year before when we were launching it. And there we have sections on who should be included. And I believe that at that level, then whoever we have identified there, is the same one that even the governments come. So we influence at that particular level. But now also at national level, because we are an Africa platform, at national level, we also work with organizations, and the organizations that we work with are diverse. Amazingly, this social protection is has been, how do you say, broken into smaller, fragments. Like we have social protection for children, we have social protection for people with disability, we have social protection for various categories of people. And I think we have one that we have missed out. COVID has taught us. We should have had one for health workers, because the health workers, a lot of them died, and the doctors, they all died during this time of COVID. And that is why I'm so glad that now we are going to be working with health as one of the things. I'm glad you stopped that, the LPS, the social protection thing, just to reflect, have we really been inclusive? So, those are some of the things. So we try to broaden our scope. We are not limited to any particular vulnerable group, because we are also informed by research. So we do research and we fund research as well. And yes, so so that is where we are. We do, right now, we are also looking at the issue of, we have a social accountability which monitors some of the services that are delivered. So we have that, and we are also working just to make sure that the civil society is involved and engaged. In Kenya, we have worked with communities, and I think it is in Busia, Kajiado, Kilifi, just to sensitize them on the issues of social protection, build their capacity to engage, capture some of their voices, and then we have shared at national level. We've also been involved in evaluating actually the current program of social protection. We were involved in that, and we have been working in partnership very closely with the government. So our voices are heard. So there's a big role that we play. We are complementary, and we also advocate, and we do research. Well, let me just talk about myself. I'm now an older person. I was young, as somebody said, 50 years. Now I'm 66. So I'm talking, and right now what I'm doing on my platform, on my plate now, I'm looking at the impact of COVID on older people, in sub-Saharan Africa. It is going to inform our organization. So we are now looking at the impact of what? Of COVID. And we have learned a lot of things from what other people did. One of the things that all the countries did in the whole world, they had a social protection intervention. It was the most effective one. So we are in the right space. Those emergency funds, those grants, those pensions in South Africa are the ones that cost the families to cross over to survive. And have evidence to show that 87% of the people in South Africa were sharing their grants with their families. So we are in the right space. Only what we need to do here is, I think we are too broad. Could we just take our social, right now, there are some things which are mature. I'm now talking, you have to forgive me now, not as a civil servant, but now as a live. I've been at this social protection thing for so long in my life now, that I think if we look at ourselves now, there's a lot of success in terms of social success, protection from the Kenyan agenda, from the time that we started. Could we be just focusing on this and giving it on a regular basis? Look, this is our success, so that we always don't look like we are beginning. It's frustrating to imagine that the question that we used to ask 40 years ago is the same one that we are asking in terms of how do we fund ourselves? What systems do we have? What is the most important thing? Surely, right now, if we look at what we have done, there's a lot of progress that has been done. Should we not, document what we have done and say, in terms of social protection, just like Ghana, because I evaluated that program, this is what we have done, and it is a good thing, and this is what is missing. So that we focus on what is missing. Otherwise, it's as if it's just as broad as it started. I'm sorry, but that's what I'm feeling.
Thank you. Thank you. Always very passionate. I remember hearing you the other time, lamenting very clearly that a society will be judged by the way it treats its vulnerable people. But you can hear very, very, very strong sentiments, very clear thoughts, very, very robust in terms of being able to move the social protection agenda forward by clear documentation, sharing of the experiences, best practices that came through, and you have touched very clearly on COVID, a study you're working on, and that very quickly takes me to Richard in terms of what exactly, having experienced, the type of vulnerabilities, the oscillations within that particular sector, even including the formal. And now, based on that experience as a country, how do we take this forward? How do we handle this, both in the informal, more so in the informal, where we know about 86-point-something% of the economy is actually being controlled by the informal. How do we go about the impact of COVID-19? What lessons have we drawn from there? And what advice can you give to us in this particular sector and as a country in general? Just in 2 minutes, I know you are elaborate, but and I believe colleagues were appreciating the discussion. You can be taking note of certain questions. I know we have the pressure of time, but just take note of certain key things that you may want to pull out to the panelists just once they are done with the round of questions. Welcome, Richard.
Hi. Right. First, thank you so much for inviting us. And thank you so much for the study and Dr. quite a good presentation. And right on point. Now, Richard, I'm not used to being told how much time.
No, I know.
Okay.
That's why I know.
I mean, this is a very, very, very important conversation. Inclusivity is a right. It is a fundamental right. When you go back to our Constitution, Article 1, we the people, it begins there. We the people. When you go to Article 27, sub-Article 2, it says that all Kenyans, we have a right to fully enjoy. When you go to Article 43, the socio-economic rights, which now brings us to this conversation here, that makes social security a right. That also, and again, when you look at that, you also look at it together with Article 21, sub-Article 2, when you say, okay, fine, much as it is a right, the government, where it's not able, there shall be that progressive realization, which John has talked about, that yes, we have not covered as many as we should, but there is that progressive realization, and he has clearly stated that as government, we're already spending 30 billion, and we look forward to bringing more on board, including the program of the Universal Child Benefit. But now, the critical thing, and Dr. when you made the presentation, and you talked about risk cover, there is that bullet that came out very clearly, that only 15% of those between 18 years and 65 years. Because these are this is the productive age. All the other people we are talking about. And social rights people, please don't condemn me, but that is the age, the children and the older person, 70 plus, they are consumers. All right? So we don't put them, when we're talking about productivity, we don't place them in terms of producing. So when only 15% is participating. Now, ladies and gentlemen, one thing that COVID-19 taught us is actually that we are all vulnerable. We are all vulnerable.
Absolutely.
Now, it's so painful, John, if the people between 18 and 65 are vulnerable and they join the vulnerable. So then what happens to the country? The moment we talked about lockdown, so Stephania could not move and feed our children. Jacinta here could not move. Everybody, we were all in the house looking at each other. Teachers, professors in private universities and academies. The PhD could not feed them. That's when you realize how hopeless you are. And COVID-19 made us feel that. And that brings us to the question of coverage. My brother here talked about coverage geographically. But we need now to look at coverage beyond geographic. We need to look at coverage beyond numbers. In terms of, we need to look at coverage in terms of how many benefits are we providing. NHIF there, during COVID, they said, oh, fine, you can go to hospital, be treated, but things dealing with COVID, they were not factored for. Hospitals, insurance firms were saying the same. So it means that talking about inclusivity, we must go back to the drawing board and look at what are we really doing. You know, my sister here, Doreen, talked about we can't keep on talking of the same thing. You know, my sister, I may not be 66, but I'm closer. You know, this conversation of social protection began way back with Isaiah and David in the Bible. For those who read the Bible, it says, do not forsake me when my bones are too weak. That was social protection. So this conversation has been there from time immemorial. What we can do is to improve on what others have done. So really, this conversation must be there. Because after, you know, we're talking about SDG 20, Richard, bear with me. We're talking about SDG 2030, it's going to come. Then we're going to talk about 2063. The question that we have to ask ourselves when we talk about inclusivity and inclusive growth, this coverage should also look at the issues touching on not only the people, but also the type of benefits. When you look at ILO Convention 102, which talks about the minimum standards, and it provides for several benefits. As a country, we now need to look beyond, because as NSSF, we've been talking about old age, survivor, invalidity. But COVID-19 told, and you realize we had a challenge, and all countries, right now we are carrying out a study. What happened with the contributory schemes? Because they had money belonging to members, but they were saying the way our scheme is designed, we can't give out this money. NHIF had the same. The way our scheme is designed, we are not able to take care of this kind of shocks. So we need to look at it and say, how do we expand? We have to expand both horizontally and vertically. Horizontally, that yes, let us bring as many people as possible, but vertically, let us also look at adequacy. We must talk adequacy. We can't talk of covering people, 1.3 million people, but the question is this: are we giving them a shopping basket? Money we are giving them, can it sustain them? And if we are talking about, because you can't talk about inclusivity without talking about sustainability. And sustainable in what terms? And sustainable from where? And that brings in the issue of political will. And I'm so happy that our presidential candidates are talking about social protection. And it's important, even after we leave this breakfast meeting, we look at how do we engage these candidates, especially the ones who are now watapita, right? So that we tell them, hey, we want to be on the table. When the time comes, when you are cutting, you know, some are campaigning to be deputy presidents, as we want to be there when they are cutting sectors, so that the social protection sector is given the highest portion. It is important because we are not going to depend on development partners. And I'm happy my brother said that our social protection is funded by none other than Kenyans. We should be proud for that. We should be proud for that. But we must move it ahead. So issues of political will, issues of sustainability, issues of inclusivity, issues of ensuring that the quality of life of our people are promoted, to me, I support. Richard, I want to talk about the informal sector. You asked me to talk about it. Yes, you asked me to talk about it.
I know we are short of time, Richard. Maybe just in a wrap.
Now, what I'm trying to say is that as government, the informal sector is actually at the heart of our concern, both at NHIF and NSSF. We do recognize that 85% of our population, working population, is not fully participating. And there are challenges to that. Challenges in terms of access, challenges in terms of the premiums that we fix, challenges in terms of the seasonality of their earnings. And what we have done as NSSF, what we have done as NHIF is to look for a framework using and exploiting the technology so that we can enable them participate. In the next round of questions, I'll comment more on that. Thank you, Richard.
I know you're bottled up, and colleagues, you can hear, and I know many of us are appreciating, and especially knowing what the country is doing and the thinking around how do we move this forward, as you heard from Madam Busolo, taking this discussion to the next level, and that came very strongly from Madam. What is the SD agenda for Kenya moving forward? Because that is where the discussion should be picked. So allow me, as we close, I'm hearing these discussions and I'm hearing the role of the government, but maybe directly to John, I would want to understand together with my colleagues here, what is the kind of framework, the policy framework that you are spearheading or you are developing to ensure that the government is able to deliver and is more adapted to deliver inclusive and just social protection in Kenya. Just in a short run. Just understanding the policy and legislative environment for social protection moving forward, because that we know is the only way we can sustainably, as Richard is saying, and inclusively be able to move this discussion to the next level. To you, please.
Thank you, Richard. One thing we should appreciate is that however bad COVID was, it taught us very good lessons. And we should take COVID as an opportunity to do things differently. Now, this word which was being called the new normal, and we have now adopted the new normal. Even in terms of the policy design, policy implementation, let's also use COVID as an opportunity to improve in the way we are doing our policies and the way we are programming them, so that now we are aligned to the new reality which might be able to come, because it was an emergency which came, nobody expected it, but we were able to cope up with it. Coming back to your question, Richard, is that in order to respond to the COVID and also to respond to the emerging world in the social protection sector, in the social protection arena, we are now reviewing the social protection policy of 2011. Now we are calling it the National Social Protection Policy, the Kenya Social Protection Policy 2022. And the beauty of that, and it was mentioned by Jacinta, is that the new policy has got 4 pillars. The first pillar is on income security. Income security is talking about the cash transfers and all those other things. The second pillar is talking about social health insurance. And health is a very, very important component in social protection. And this one was a realization that much of the money we are giving for cash transfers, a bigger portion of it was going towards health needs of the beneficiaries, and especially our senior citizens. They were not using that money maybe for food, for other needs. But now with now social health insurance, we are assured that now the beneficiaries will not spend their money on health, but maybe they will spend it on more other needs. The third component, the third pillar is called the complementary program. The complementary program is whereby now we are coming up with, no, it's the third one is called the shock responsiveness. Shock responsiveness, now we are looking at the various shocks. COVID was one of the shocks. Locust was one of the shocks. If we get the drought, it's another shock. Even now the global one, which is the Ukraine war, is another shock because it's going to bring a lot of things. So how do we address the shocks which come as a result of emergencies and other things? So now our social protection policy is addressing that one. And the fourth pillar is on complementary programs. The reason also why we came up with complementary program is that we realized that cash alone cannot remove people from poverty. Cash alone cannot remove people from poverty. And as a result, therefore, we need now to add value into that cash we are giving. We needed now to come up with a cash plus. And that cash plus is a complementary program. We give them health insurance, we give them economic inclusion, we give them financial literacy, and we give them all these other complementaries, which will support them maybe they can be able. So that's how now our social protection policy is a very, very dynamic one. Number two, Kenya, every year in, year out, we are always hit by emergencies, by drought, by famine, maybe by floods, and all those other things. In order also to support that one, and also to ensure that it doesn't hit us very bad, the State Department is also coming up with a new policy. The policy is called the National Relief Assistance Policy. The National Relief Assistance Policy is a policy which is now going to be responding now to the relief. In case there is famine, in case there is drought, in case there are drought, how do we respond to those ones? How do we address those ones? And in order for this one now to be properly addressed, a law is going to be enacted on that one. And above all, we're also coming up with an MIS system called the RAMIS, that is the Relief Assistance Management Information System, whereby the data for all those people who are affected either by drought, by famine, and all those things are going out, is going to be available, it will be mined, and then it's going to be responded. But also, the government has also come up with a policy shift, whereby initially, during the drought, the relief and all those things, we used to give famine relief. And it was realized that giving famine relief, number one, was very expensive, it was taking a lot of time, and then it was very undignified. Telling people to go and queue for a whole day, and then they get 1 or 2 gorogoros of maize to go and eat. Because of that one now, the government now have also now come up with a policy shift whereby instead of giving famine relief, it will now be giving cash transfer. And we have already implemented on that one. We have given like 2 tranches of the cash transfer. And we realize that once we give cash transfer, number one, it's real time. You send money, within 5 minutes, the money has reached the beneficiaries. Within 20 minutes, the beneficiaries have gone to the shops and they have bought money using the transfer. The other thing is that that money gives them the choice on the food they wanted to buy. If you send money to Mandera or to Marsabit or wherever, the beneficiaries will now use that money and they buy the food which is available and also the food which is according to their eating habits and all those things. So those things are there and we are going to do it. The other thing which the government is also doing is that it is realizing that for us to advance, we need to sensitize, we need to educate our policy makers and our policy implementers. So policy-wise, and with the support of development partners, and especially the World Food Program, we have come up with a capacity development program. And the capacity development program is whereby we want to create a mass of social protection implementers, people with the knowledge on social protection, so that when they go to parliament, when they're in the offices, wherever they are, including our ministers, our PSs, they are well trained, they are well sensitized on social protection. And the beauty is that capacity building has already been institutionalized in Kenya School of Government. So there is already a curriculum on social protection is being implemented. And Kenya also support with the support of Transform Africa, we are also training people who can be able to train us to train other people on how we are going to implement on these ones. Finally, in terms of the policy-wise, we have also come up with a community of practice platform for Kenya. That is the Kenyan chapter. This is also another very, very good forum whereby we will be sharing best practices. You'll be sharing lessons. And I'm happy that Obasa is here, is the one who is coordinating that one. This is the forum which is very, very good because we are discussing various topics on social protection. And once we discuss that one, we are learning a lot, we are exchanging a lot. And that way now, we are now starting now to have new conversations on what is happening, not only in Kenya, but in other places. So in terms of the policy-wise, it is very good. The other one I mentioned about is the issue to do with the investment plan. That's now where we want to move. And for us to implement the investment plan, and let me say this categorically with the civil societies which are here, we cannot achieve inclusivity in Kenya. We cannot achieve full coverage without the establishment of the social assistance fund. We made an attempt to do a social assistance fund. We wanted to repeal the Social Assistance Act of 2013, but unfortunately, we never got support from the civil societies. Some of them, they went behind us, they sabotaged, and then when it went to parliament, it was kicked. But the idea was very noble, because we wanted to have a fund whereby from January to December, the money will always be available. The money from the government, that $1 billion will be going to that kitty. Money from other partners will come to that kitty. And then money in that fund will also be invested. It will be deposited. And that fund will keep on growing. Maybe in 5 or 10 years' time, the fund will start maybe from that $1 billion, it will reach maybe 100 billion, maybe 200 billion. And that's the only solution we can have. But as long as we are relying on the exchequer, every year exchequer, in terms of the coverage, we might not be able to improve in terms of either horizontal coverage or vertical coverage. Because when it comes now to the horizontal coverage of vertical coverage, the dilemma we are having is the policy dilemma. Do we do horizontal or do we do vertical? Do we add those ones, the few ones, the 1.33 million, we add them more, or do we bring on board others who are not getting it on that one? So my request for the partners and the civil society is, please, once we revive the issue of the social assistance, please support us. The idea was very normal, and that's the one which is going to save us to cover all those ones. And it was going to be backed by the social protection policy. It was supposed to be backed by a registration on Social Protections Act, and that way we will be able now to move forward like other countries like Brazil who are doing well in the social protection arena. Thank you.
Thank you so much, John. Very powerful insights. I think most of us are learning a lot. We are seeing what the government is doing, the direction we are moving, and how to address sustainability of social protection. Allow me, I know there are burning issues from the participants. I know I'll be coming to you in a quick round of parting shot. I know there are issues we should have brought out. I appreciate, as you can hear John speak, issues on learning, sharing, knowledge exchange. How do you ensure that the policymakers, I appreciate that the heading for this particular breakfast was, policy uptake, higher policy uptake. How do you ensure that our policymakers are able to take up on some of these issues, unless there is a threshold of understanding that has been built through such strategies, learning exchange, the platform, the community of practice. So I know I'll be coming back to you for your parting shot and just being able to see into what is it that we do. Allow me to take just maybe 2 or 3 reactions from the participants, then we can wrap up very quickly. Very quickly, short and clear, because of time.
Just 2 comments. We know that from 0 up to maybe 100 years. As a government and as a country, we need to mainstream this data on population so that the team which is spearheading this very important agenda does not have to struggle to get this data in order to develop their programs. And hence, if you look at 0 to 3, we already know the type of vulnerabilities, the needs, and resilience they need. Can we take care of that in the strategy and also in the policy and in our programs? When it goes to age 3 to 24, we do know these are the education level, but when it comes to vulnerabilities, we know where need is. That is key. And age 65 to 100. We know the number, we know where they're located, can we target them? And finally, the area of designing the programs and also the shocks that come in. Maybe that's a very critical area, and as stakeholders in social protection, we may need to ensure that all the complementary sectors like health, education, food security, and housing, what are they doing that can complement what we do?
Thank you. Thank you so much. Let's take another one. We'll respond to them together. Any other hand? Okay. Yes, Sylvester.
Yes, thank you, Richard. I have a question for John. You have talked very, very well about the role of the government and of course the services that the government is providing, including the policies in place, which includes the current social protection policy 2022, which is very good. You have also mentioned that currently the government is doing what we call the social registry, which will cover all populations that are poor and vulnerable groups. If you find in terms of your capture of the data and the population that you have 10 million poor and vulnerable population, and reflect back in terms of what the government is allocating for social protection program in Kenya, of course that will not be enough. But my question is, how do we want to reach these policy makers, including parliamentarians, with this kind of information, so that there is that uptake in terms of allocating more budget for social protection services, apart or besides using what we call the social assistance fund? Because of course this will also still go back to the parliament, and of course we expect that this time, as you mentioned, that the civil society will support you, everyone will support you, including Sylvester. I will support you to make sure this goes through. But before this comes on board, how do we reach the parliamentarians so that then this information reaches them in a package that they can use that to convince the other members that we need more money for this particular department to support social protection services. And as I conclude, and Richard mentioned that social protection inclusivity is a right. So in other words, the government should actually take this challenge to make sure that all the poor and the vulnerable group are actually receiving the services that they need, including the people with severe disability and that group with disability that has been left out, which is only 1%. So the other group has also been left out. How do we ensure that this information reaches the right policy makers so that then an action can be taken to take care of all this?
Thank you, thank you. Thank you so much, Sylvester. I want to believe that that was the last hand. Allow me to bring this to a close. I know there are two issues that have been raised. One is very specific to issues of reaching the policymakers and being able to influence the budget to be able to go on an upward trajectory, what we would commonly say the percent of the GDP allocated for social protection. But allow me now, even as they will be answering, I think they'll be answering the questions together with their parting shot for this particular session, just in the interest of time. So allow me first to come to Dr. Anthony. Please, I just want to hear your last remarks around what we have. I know there are a lot of issues around policy uptake, the learning that you have really elaborately emphasized, and how then can we better take this to be able to address even some of the emerging issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's very hard to give the parting shot when the older people have spoken and they speak in passion and wisdom. So, and I think I'm the youngest.
We are in the life cycle.
And as a humble African boy, sometimes you have to be careful when you're surrounded by older people. What I would say is there's scope for learning. That's one thing I'm picking from this conversation. There's so much scope for learning. There's so much knowledge. We need to think about how do we coordinate this knowledge and have a more societal-wide learning from different spectrums, from both policymakers, from practitioners, from researchers, and create a web of how we work together. Because there's a lot of back and forth, a lot of knowledge. One thing which is characterizing our economies is the silos. The government tends to work in its own silos, civil society, the same, private sector, the same. We think from all these rich conversations, what the government is doing, what civil society is doing, what research is doing, and perhaps what private sector is doing. We don't have the donor community, maybe donors, what are they doing? I think there's an opportunity here to share and learn together and plan ahead. That's number one. But number two, hearing more from the government, I think it's very important to have forward thinking, because all these good plans, things change, things evolve. And I was pleased to hear that the government of Kenya is also forward looking. I think this for me is a key and very important message to take home, that we need to look forward. We always need to anticipate. We need to be prepared. One of the challenges that we face as countries, and I will not speak of Kenya only, I'll speak of African countries, we are always unprepared when it comes to pandemic, when it comes to shocks. But what I hear from the government plans, what I hear from government strategies, is that there's that forward looking and anticipate. Of course, you can't anticipate when you're dying, but it's good to think about it. So you have a plan, okay? Although in African culture, we say, when you go kwa deka urithi, unajichuria Kiswahili, meaning you're predicting your death, and no one wants to die. The third takeaway here is, well, it's good that we are funding. Kenya is funding most of the social protection. So how big is the funding? How big should it be? That's number one. I think that's very important. Is 30 billion Kenyan shillings a year enough? Okay, he raised a very important point. Should we add more to those already covered? Or should we, is it about the quality or the quantity? So it's the quality-quantity trade-off.
Yeah.
We have more people who are falling into vulnerability beyond 1.33 million. Should we take them on board? If we do that, that's the quantity. Then we can't increase the ceiling. And if we choose to increase, then we have to spread the cake equally, the cost of distribution. But should we choose to say, okay, forget about the other ones, we are now capping to 1.33 million Kenyans who are vulnerable, and then it comes to the question of adequacy. Are we going to bump up more resources so that when we send money, we are sending money that can actually adequately address what the household's vulnerabilities is? When I was in the US as a student, and I remember my daughter was, but I'm going to share this because it was a personal experience. I was fully funded by the US government as a Fulbright scholar, and I get stipend every month, house paid for, laptop paid for, everything paid for. My daughter was born, and suddenly I fell into poverty. I was given food stamps every week. They don't give you money. They give you food stamps so that they make sure, because the baby is American, they have nutritious content that the baby needs to get. They never trusted that, even if you had 2 other children, they didn't care. They say, this one. They even teach you how to do. So we used to be given food stamps, Walmart, so you can get milk, you can get eggs. They have very specific type of food that you need to get to remain healthy. And it was given across families. When I moved to Europe, Denmark, for a few years, very interesting social welfare system. It changed. Even though I was working for the Danish government, they had a very unique system. My wife was not working, but they calculated their calculation of poverty line is very different from ours. They calculate by the square of the house you live in, the number of bedrooms, how many children do you have, and we fell below poverty line, although I was an employee of the government. And what happens is they give money to the wife. Babas never get money. So they calculate whatever it is to subsidize the housing, to subsidize the food, and then they give it to the wife. Even no matter what happens, you'll never see that money. It goes to the mother's account. It's a policy. So what I'm trying to say here, they're small countries, they have a very robust system of how handling this. And of course, taxes were very high. I used to pay 50% taxes. I'm not sure whether you tell Kenyans to pay 50% now, that is gonna go well. But I think what I'm seeing from this conversation is a need to look into the contextual issues within our society. How do we define Kenya? How do we define Africa? And what are the best coping mechanisms sustainably going forward that we need to put in place that are defined by our values? If it's money, if we're going to put more money, for who? And what are we going to include in terms of the coverage that mandate is being given? It's not about just ticking boxes. We are talking about people's lives here. And at some point, all of us, we're going to go through that phase. We're all going to grow old and we will need that help. So that forward thinking and having a sense of humanitarian touch to providing support to the most vulnerable in society, I think it's a virtue that we all need to embrace going forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's very, very insightful. Let's hear from Richard very quickly. Your key takeaways, parting shot. What is it that you would say in one word?
I don't recall what is enough.
You see,
Okay, this is one paragraph.
the audience, the audience have said now. Thank you for coming to my defense. There are several key takeaways, and this has been wonderful. One, and very important to PASGA, we need more of this. We need to have this conversation, and so that it's part of sharing. It's part of sharing, and if we don't share, then it doesn't get out. My brother here talked about creating awareness. Inclusivity cannot be achieved if the public, if the citizenry are not aware. NHIF has recently, the act has been amended. Very beautiful things in that act. And probably, PASGA, we need to have a conversation about universal healthcare. Just meet here and talk about that. And how best can we make Kenyans understand this? Because it is important, because we can't talk about universal healthcare if the beneficiaries are not aware of it. And that's probably, and I think also, like my brother said here, it's not just enough about training people to train. It's about training people to appreciate social protection. Because when you see Kenyans saying they will not allow and they will not accept to pay more than 1,700 to NHIF, because how are you going to create solidarity? Because we need to think inclusivity is about solidarity. Ability to bring those ones who are not able to come on board so that they can enjoy with others. And again, my sister there talked about even the issue of life cycle. If you look at the issue, our constitution has already brought it up. So it's important that as we talk about this, we are looking at everybody. We are looking at Article 54, which is talking about disability. We are looking at Article 55. We are looking up to Article 57 that is talking about longevity, and my sister Dolinia about people who are approaching 100 years. And the most important thing is, as we discuss inclusivity, let us talk about affordability. And this question has come up, and I've been listening to, we can't avoid politics. I've been listening to our presidential candidates, and every time they talk about social protection, I feel like dancing wherever I am. When they talk about 6K and others are saying how, I say it's possible, it can be done. So, because it is important that as we go out there, because if we begin questioning and we begin doubting, how they will do it, let it not be our worry. Let us tell them we support it. Yes. Even if they say 100,000, yes. When they come after August 9, we tell them, you promised, you deliver. Yes. So it is important, because once they're bringing the conversation, we are killing it by questioning it. Let us put fire. Let us put fire. Let where they are, and forget about anything they talk about. But when they talk about 6K, clap and tell them, yay, come. Wait, because unless we support it, unless we make everybody to talk social protection, then it can't be achieved. My brother talked about how the fund died. I guess it died probably because there was no enough awareness, there was no enough appreciation, because when we create that knowledge, then we shall be there. Granted, let us look forward, but we can't look forward without looking back. What brought us to where we are? And so it's important to have this conversation, because the issue, and I want to go to the question that my sister asked last. How can we redesign social protection so that issues of inclusivity are brought there? And this is exactly what NHIF and NSSF are doing, and especially when we are talking about the informal. When my brother here was making his presentation, and they talked about what we discussed last year, and the dichotomy of the informal and the formal. Because this conversation of the formal and the informal is also bringing issues of inclusivity. It means there is a section of our
constituency, our people that are not participating. And Richard here, when he was making his opening remarks, he talked about the missing middle. The only way we can reduce that missing middle is we need to ask ourselves, why are these people missing? Why are they not participating? And therefore we need, my brother here, we need to look at the whole of our social protection system. Because one of the biggest challenges we had during COVID-19 was that our social protection system was not strong enough to withstand the shock. And therefore, we need to relook at our social protection system and strengthen it and expand it. And that inclusivity may sound just a word, but inclusivity involves that strengthening, involves that expanding. And finally, Richard, so that I finish. Yeah, finally, so that I finish. Finally, so that I finish.
I know we're short of time by far.
Yes.
Okay.
Inclusivity is about coverage. And I want us to look at 3 dimensions of coverage. Coverage in terms of numbers. That's inclusivity. We bring Akech in, we bring Dr. Mfenyange in, we bring Roslyn Rose in, we bring Ochieng in, and we bring everybody in. That's just one element of coverage. So that we all say tuko pamoja. But we cannot be pamoja when some animals are bigger than others. So let us also look at terms of reducing vertically also. Let us see that what we are giving is enough to make everybody. My brother here, you are very lucky, you are enjoying in Denmark, very nice things. We want you now from Pasika to tell us here in Kenya we can enjoy those things. How do we also remove this 2,000 that my brother here has been giving to 6K? By the way, I'm a supporter of 6K. So basically, it's important that we look at it. And finally, yes, finally, in terms of coverage, let us look at how to increase the benefits so that we are not just talking about like Richard, the issue of unemployment benefit, the issue of maternity. My sister here at NHIF, currently they're doing a study, and soon it will be one of the benefits they want to introduce is maternity income under NHIF. Because you see, when ladies go under that process and procedure, there is lots of what? Income. So let us think about numbers. Let us think about benefits. Let us think about the quality. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you.
Thank you so much, Richard. I know you need an expanded time frame. John, I don't know how you go about it. We are really past time, but I know your issues that you want to say as a takeaway to this group, including what has been raised to you, but I know it has been answered in previous ways about how then do you ensure issues of awareness for policy uptake that was raised by Sylvester. But I think that is very clear in terms of how we handle it. Your last word, please.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Richard. I will respond to the questions which was raised by my sister there behind on the life cycle approach, and also the issue which was raised by Sylvester on the issue of social registry and how we can use that information to sensitize our policy makers. Our new policy is looking at the life cycle approach, and it's looking at the entire life cycle approach. The life cycle of a child may be from 0 to 3 years, and what are the risks? What are the vulnerabilities which are there, and what programs can be able to come up to respond to those risks? And then it's talking about the teenagers, it's talking about the youth, it's talking about the unemployed, it's talking about those ones who are adults, it's talking about the disability and what are their risks and what is required of them. It's talking about the working class. It's also talking about the senior citizen who are 60 years and above. So it's looking at all the life cycle approach. And the way we want to look at it is that we want now to go universal in our programming. And so far, we have got 2 universal programs. The 70 plus, which is universal for the senior citizen, and then now we are piloting on the UCB. And we are hoping that moving forward, maybe you'll be bringing on board more programs more benefits which are universal, so that now we can apply, we can be able to approach the life cycle approach. And this way, maybe in the next 10 years or so, maybe you have more universal programs increasing the coverage and also increasing the benefits. For Sylvester, the issue of the social registry, this is going to be a game changer. Because number one, we are going to establish the first social registry in Kenya and also maybe in Africa, other than Brazil. Brazil, they have one they call it the unique, they call it the unified registry. Ours, we are calling it the social registry, whereby we'll have the data of all the poor and vulnerable people with the socio-economic household characteristics. And this is data which is going to be dynamic because it's going to be updated regularly. If new members are introduced in the households, it is going to be updated. If new members exit the household, maybe through death, it's going to be updated. If the socioeconomic status of those people changes, it's going to be done. And that data is going to be disaggregated for the whole country, and then it will have several characteristics, several parameters. And this data now will now be our evidence. It will be now our bargaining document, so that when we go to Parliament to bargain, to look for resources, we will be having data, we will be having statistics. When we go to the National Treasury to seek for more funding, when we want to come up with a program, we'll have data. And you know, figures don't cheat, they talk a lot. Because now, every time we go to the National Treasury, we are seeking for funding. They ask us, where are the numbers? Where is the evidence? When we go to the Parliament, they ask us, what are the numbers in my constituency? What are the numbers in my county? But we are hoping that this social registry is now going to give us these numbers. And these numbers are going out to be the evidence we are going to be using. And at the same time, these are the numbers we are going to be using also to be doing the programming. Currently, we are dealing with categorical programs. But maybe we also want now to move out of the categorical programs. Maybe we can now go to programs based on the needs, based on maybe the emergencies and other things which are coming. So I think I have responded to the two questions. Now coming back to my parting shots. I have three. Number one, and it was raised by Dr. during the presentation, the issue to do with documentation. In Kenya, and also my sister is here. In Kenya, we have been implementing cash transfer and other social protection programs, maybe for the last 16, 20 years. But we have done very, very little documentation, which we can even share to the whole world. The City of Easy program started as a pilot in 2004. The older person started in 2007 as a pilot. Since that time, a lot has been achieved. Lessons have been learned, but we have done very little documentation. We have done very, very little impact assessment. And even if we have done very little to share that. So maybe this is where now we need now to do a lot of documentation. We collect a lot of data, we share that data. And if possible, we even establish a knowledge management center or knowledge management system whereby that data can be there. And now with that data, we can showcase what Kenya is doing like other countries they are doing. Number two, but in short, is that we also need to appreciate the far we have done. And I guess, Dr. you mentioned that one. In terms of the delivery systems, we are very good in delivery systems. Because already all our beneficiaries of cash transfers, they are receiving money through bank accounts. And we have got two-factor authentication. We use the ID and also we use the BIOS. And those bank accounts, they have a saving value, whereby the beneficiaries can save money in that account and they can use that money at the appropriate time. So we need now to support so that now we can be able now to improve that delivery system. And now what we have done is that now we have improved it by now, linking now our delivery systems now to mobile payment platforms. Now, whereby now our beneficiaries now can access their money using a mobile money. When we start now paying for the family relief, and also when we are paying for the COVID, we used the mobile money. We never used bank accounts. And that system proved to be very, very effective. So the only challenge we are having is issues with the name, the ID, and the SIM card registration, and maybe that's something which can be technically be solved or something like that. So we are hoping that in terms of the delivery systems, we are doing very well. It's something we can even show the whole world, but still there's room for improvement so that it can be done better, and especially on the mobile money platform. Finally, but not the least, and maybe it's for everybody who is here, including our policy makers. We should remove this notion, which is in everybody, that social protection is an expenditure. Social protection is a cost. Social protection creates dependency. No, it doesn't. It is not a cost, it is not an expenditure, but instead it is an investment. Once we do social protection interventions, we are investing in our poor and vulnerable. We are investing in our societies of Kenya so that they can be more productive, they can be self-sustaining, they can be income secure, and that way they participate in the development of the country like any other person. Thank you.
Thank you so much, John. I know we are past Madame Busolo. I know, like, you always wrap it up in a powerful statement. And I know you can do that.
Okay, thank you. John's parting shot was also going to be mine, so he's already taken off one. I'm glad about that.
Okay.
But I also want to emphasize the issue of the media, the social media. We have not talked about it, and it was brought out as one of the hindrances to our social protection work. I've also seen it also in my research that the people who are vulnerable could not easily migrate. You know, when COVID hit, everybody needed to go to the social media to operate. Even right now, that's the thing. So how are we going to integrate this? Whatever its ramifications, we need to be able to bring it on board so that the beneficiaries then they can increase their voices, if it's through the radio or whatever it is. And I'm so glad about the documentation issue. So that is good. The other thing is what was also brought up before by the director and also the presenter, the issue of our indigenous practices. When I came here, I told you that I will tell you that I have 3 people, even though I'm retired. I have a social protection program for 3 or 5 people. These people have been with them from the time I used to work, and I sent them some money for support. And I gave sometimes an accountability. And it was a lot when I had a lot of money. Now it's little because I have little. But we cannot be talking, if you are a social protection expert, you cannot be talking about this if you have a different attitude. The first person you should deal with is yourself. So even before we go to the parliament, we who are here now, what are we planning to do? Because those people are there. They have their own agenda. If we can be able to change our attitude, because the conversation I'm hearing from the media, it's as if everybody for themselves. You can't go to visit so and so and bring them anything. My niece was telling me, I'm sorry, I have many rats. My niece was telling me, one of the things you taught us is that when we go to somebody's house, we must take sugar. And that is not right, auntie. We are unlearning that. My goodness, how can you say that? And poverty is increasing. What are we doing ourselves? If we think social protection is going to just happen, it is not going to happen. It is a matter of the heart. And so even as we approach this, we have to see the poor. We have to see the needy. We who are the advocates, unless we change our minds, unless we reach to that level where we are seeing them, it will not happen. So what we plant is what we reap. That is my parting shot. So I'm saying these indigenous methods, you will see how they are doing it in South Africa or whichever country it was. They have a name for it. You have identified Harambe. Why are we underestimating that? Our chamas, coping strategies, that is what it's all about. So even if we have our indigenous one, we integrate it with as they work up there, we also work here at household level. So I'm just trying to say it works, and it has to begin with us. So that is what I want to say. Otherwise, everything else technical has already been said. The recommendations that I have already been said by this team. But we, the civil society, we are the grassroots. We are doing our best to make sure that what is happening up there is also, we're getting the voices of the people on board, and we shall continue to do this. Thank you, government, for what you have done. I'm amazed because when I was doing this research on the COVID impact, one of the good practices was that for vulnerable groups, the 3 things that they need to have is a social protection, some social protection, a health insurance, and free health and testing as far as COVID is concerned. And you have them there, which is excellent. I'm so glad about that. It will work. Thank you so much for involving us.
Thank you so much. Let's give a powerful round of applause to our panelists.
even as they go back and take their seats. Thank you. I know you can see the level of engagement. I would agree more with Richard. We need more of this. So Pascal, you can hear our voice. Yeah, we need more of this. We are only short of time, and I think we'll still reconnect. So parting shot from both John and Madame, we must be sold out to social protection. We must be the front runners. We must be the champions. Let us begin to see champions in every sector of social protection. Let's saturate the environment with social protection. I think that is the right one. I remember what Richard said. If it is not shared, then it cannot get out there. Let's share it loud. Let's be very visible. Let's ensure that we are very strategic in our reach out, forward thinking, forward looking, planning ahead, and trying to hit and punch at every time to the extent that we cannot be ignored. I remember the last time we had this conference. No, we had another conference. Another colleague, I think that was from. You remember the guy called Lefoco? He said it must be like a skunk. A skunk you cannot, passes here you cannot ignore. The smell is so terrible. You have to turn and notice the skunk. So that is for us in social protection. People pass, they must notice you. So that is your assignment. So very fast, I would want to bring this to a close. I know we'll be having our concluding remarks from Madame Jacinta, and then the vote of thanks from Pascal. But it's very clear that from here, there are clear defined pathways going forward. Then what do we do? What is our takeaway from here? What are the key things, even as we hear the parting shot from our panelists? And more so, what is it that we need as a country? I had the question, the last provoking thought from our presenter here in terms of how do we bolden the broader agenda for social protection moving forward? How do we ensure that we have such a bold, robust agenda for social protection in Kenya, even as we go through? So please allow me to bring in Madam Jacinta. I know in terms of the key takeaways, what happens after this, there are those things we want to concretize. How do we ensure, it was about inclusivity and a just social protection system. How do we ensure that we can redesign across some of our programs to ensure that the issue of inclusivity, you could still hear the resonating voice of sustainable financing and increased investment in social protection. You can still see the replay of the issue of awareness and the strategic engagement of our various stakeholders, just to be sure that we can move the social protection agenda forward. These are some of the issues that we need, because with that, we'll be able to cover and address issues of coverage, quality of benefits, and such like issues that are plaguing us. Again, we'll still see into how then do we move into the whole debate of the informal economy and bringing them into, I know there is a strong debate on formal, which is quite a discussion and introduction of some of the benefits that are able to, to take us forward. I could hear John, and I know Madam Stephanie is here, in terms of how then can we also have a very robust legislation that would see into establishment of a fund for social protection that would ensure that we have such a basket that does not rely on the cycles, of the government, to the extent that there are times where you have delays or inadequacy of that, or confidence, integrity, accountability, and governance. I think these are some of the discussions that we are taking forward. So without much ado, please let me welcome Madam Jacinta just to give the closing remarks, and then Pastor Dr. Anthony will be giving the vote of thanks as well.
Okay, thank you, Richard. Let me break the protocol. Madam Stephanie, come and say a word.
So how is everyone?
We are fine.
Well, she just caught me by surprise there. And I'm glad to be here. And I share really what the panels shared together. We've been in this journey for quite a while. I appreciate John for bringing up that one, that Pascal, together with APSP, you just brought us down when we thought we were moving a step ahead. And really, I think, like he said, it was a noble cause. we wanted it to move forward because our intention as government is to make sure that social protection works in this country. And we needed a step forward. So what we did there is that we moved back several steps, and we now have to go back to the table and start thinking about how best do we then move this forward. So I think now that we're all in the room, it is time we started thinking now, how do we pick what we dropped and start pushing it forward. For me, I would have wanted to join you earlier, I just got delayed a little bit, but we are in this together, and I think we will continue working together. Thank you so much. And I'm passionate with the registry they talked about. I'm coordinating the registry, just that we want to also make sure that that as an instrument is up and running and can be able to support coordination in the social protection sector, besides allowing us to be able to operationalize a life cycle approach within the programs for social protection in the country. But thank you very much, Jacinta. Thank you.
Well, Stephanie, I didn't want you to leave before you talk about, I know John talked about it, but the social registry, it's going to be very important. And you're telling them that this financial year, we want to reach 17 counties. So that is a good achievement. So colleagues, thank you so much. We have had very good discussions. And let me just say that it has been a very good learning experience. If I may start with Dr. Anthony, you said something that has touched me, especially when you said that, is it in Denmark, money is given to women to take care of children. I just thought about it because remember, John talked about UCB, which we are piloting. And in the operations manual for UCB, UCB's Universal Child Benefit. Yeah, so in the manual, it was indicated that the money be given to the mother. And Kenyans had a lot of opposition saying that, mind you, they are also single fathers. They should be given money. So I think it is something really we need to think, how do we put it? Because again, even apart from what others were saying that men must also be given money, recently we were having a meeting with the county coordinators for those areas, and they told us that in some of the evaluations they are doing, men are saying that thanks be to God you didn't give us the money. We would have gone with it somewhere. So when I heard him say that, I was very happy, and I just thought in my mind, these are things we need to revisit and see how to work with them as we are here in Kenya. So thank you so much. I know John has also brought in a number of issues. He's very passionate. Very many things have been highlighted. And on my side, I would just want to say that we have learned a lot also from what he has brought forward. We have also learned a lot from Richard Rory. Rory, don't pretend that you are now not here. So from Rory, we have also learned a lot of things, and it is very good what he has said, that Kenya is coming up with something on employment, because we learned during COVID, employment benefit. As a country, can we work? Can we have something? What if you lose your job? Is there something that can cushion you? So those are areas we need to sincerely look into and make sure that a lot is done. So for Madam, I know we were with her during the time for the protocol for social protection, which I know Kenya is also working on. And the way she said, there are very many actors. If as a country, we sign this protocol, what are going to be our responsibilities? And the way she talked about it, it is not only the State Department,
Education Attorney General was leading the process. What do they have there? Being the lawmakers in the country. Agriculture, I know we work with them a lot. Mary was here, and even in education. So all these are people that do social protection. So in conclusion, me, what I'm seeing here is that we need a lot of coordination, and coordination from the government, from the civil society, from the development partners. With that, we are going to achieve a lot in this sector. So as we are here, let's think, how do we work, how do we coordinate? We also need a lot of sensitization. This one has come up and over, but it is not bad for us if we repeat it. A lot of sensitization, and as John said, social protection is an investment. I was not just coming to say it, but we need, even within the government. Last week, Treasury was asking us that when you talk of a program, who is funding what? That should be the first question. Where is money coming from? So those are things that as a government, we need a lot of sensitization. We need to see that social protection, you are investing for the future. Right now, as we are here, I don't know how many of us have received phone calls for Form 1 selection, joining of Form 1. How many of you? Oh, we need money. Oh, the school fees is not enough. Send us money. So all of us, we are in that. Even you. Yeah, and you said. So that is why we are saying that social protection is really an important sector, and we cannot really ignore it. And the way it changes, we need to take care. So let us coordinate, let us sensitize each other so that we know, we remove it from our mind that it encourages laziness. The way some school of thoughts think about it, there are no free things. If you think free things are to be there, I don't know, they were last given in the Bible or something. At one point we were in a meeting and somebody said that. So let us sensitize each other, know why the benefits are there, the investment, and also let us also try the life cycle. Think about it. I think I'm very excited normally about the life cycle, so that we don't see that there's a section of us that are not being taken care of. So all of us, depending on whatever the situation is, at least the social protection is taking care of us. So let me take this opportunity to really thank all of you. Pastor, thank you for organizing this. We want to assure you as the ministry that we are open. Please come, let us work on this together. It has been said that you cannot achieve it alone. Even us as a government, we cannot achieve this noble cause alone. So please come, let us work together. I know African platform, you have been there, even when in most of the meetings, you've been there. So let us work together in whatever you are doing. World Food Program, David, I know you are there. We do a lot of work with you and UNICEF. So thank you for representing the development partners. And we still assure you that as a government, we want to move a lot forward, but we must work together, all of us, so that we see how this country moves forward. So with that, I don't know if there's anybody I've forgotten. From the State Department, I know there's somebody who did not introduce himself, but just say he's here also, he came late. From the National Council for Children's Services, I know issues of children. They are right now dealing with the children's bill. I know it has moved a good step, but we are working together. So thank you, and let us be represented. So from NSSF, NHIF, agriculture, let us work together and move this sector ahead. So with that, let me say that we are done, but let us encourage each other to really talk to each other, coordinate, involve each other, be there for each other, think together, and all shall be well. So with that, let me say thank you and say that we'll work together. I don't want to say I'm closing. I can say closing in quotes because I know there's still a lot of funds. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Allow me to speak in Kiswahili. I feel naomba niwashukuru kwa heshima na taadhima kusimama mbele yenu muda huu. I know some of you are like, what is this guy saying? Lakini kwanza nitoe shukrani zangu za dhati kwa wote ambao mmekuja asubuhi kujumuika nasi kupata kifungua kinywa, lakini pia kupata gumzo kuhusu masuala ya jamii, hususan social protection. Thank you very much. I will not go around to mention who is in the room. I think that has already been done. My key message as a vote of thanks, let's keep the fire burning. Huu moto uendelee kuwaka. Gurudumu la maendeleo lazima liendelee kuzunguka. Majadiliano, magumzo kama haya lazima yaendelee kuwepo. Kokote unakokwenda, siku zote kumbuka kuna Pascal. Pascal ni mdau mkuu katika hii nyanja ya ulinzi wa jamii, social protection. Now, as a Tanzanian, sometimes I enjoy speaking Kiswahili and looking at Kenyans and how they struggle to follow. All right, I'll shift to English because that makes it easy for everyone. I just want to say thank you very much for your presence this morning. I think you have enjoyed the breakfast, and I believe it wasn't just breakfast. It also stimulated your mind, it stimulated your brains. You have something to think about. You have some messages to think about. I think that's very important. Evidence-informed policymaking is one of the central pillars of Pascal's work. That's what we do. We spice conversations like this. We want to make sure policymakers have the right information. We create platforms where conversation can happen. My hope and plea to policymakers, this is not just the usual typical conversation. I think you're getting the nuggets for you to think about policies, for you to take away. Pascal's door is open. Thank you very much for opening the door to us. We will all definitely knock on your door in many ways, in many respects. Feel the same. APSP, you've been our partner all along. Feel the same. Nothing has changed. If anything, there's more. The door has becoming bigger and bigger to allow more policy dialogues, more conversation, and collective thinking of how we are going to do things going forward. With all those few remarks, again, there's still leftovers. Feel free if you want to pack. They're all paid for, so we don't waste resources. At least. Thank you very much for this conversation. Very lively, very engaging, very passionate. I've learned a lot, and I hope it's the beginning of more conversation like this going forward. Thank you very much. Have a safe journey back to the office and enjoy your Friday and weekend with your loved ones. Thank you.
Special request. We are going to have a photo session just by the poolside for only 3 minutes. Photo session by the poolside just for only 3 minutes before we depart.